Hi, everybody. Okay, so we are here for the conclusion, the final part of this three-part series for Book 4, Out of Oz, by Gregory Maguire, of the Wicked Years. And we left off where Rain and Dorothy were on their way to the Emerald City. Tip had just parted ways with them to go to Munchkinland to meet up with Lamambi to, resubmit himself to his indentured abusivehood as her adopted son, and try to get his hands on the Grimoire. So it's kind of funny. It's interesting to see. So this last part, I wanted to focus a little bit on it because there's a lot of juxtaposition about how we started this journey with Elphaba and Galinda walking into the Emerald City. And the glory and the splendor and the vibrancy and the history and the allure and just that fantasy that they had in their hearts. With, starry eyes, getting to see the wizard and the proposal of Madam Morrible for them to be, these sorceresses that, kind of secretly controlled the 4 provinces of the nation on behalf of the wizard. And it was kind of a cool time, obviously leading up to the tragedy of, Elphaba's conflict with the wizard and confronting him about the animals and about the Grimoire. Like I said, the juxtaposition here now in Book 4 is we are now witnessing through a completely different lens the same concept of these two girls, now Dorothy and Rain, walking through the streets of the Emerald City. And it's interesting to see from the perspective of Dorothy, where once she was heralded as the hero of the hour for, slaying the Wicked Witch, carrying her broom through the city, to the wizard as a returning hero. Now the city's looking at her like, we know what you did. Because, as time has passed, especially with Lear and everything that he did in Son of a Witch, the people of Oz know that the wizard was a bad man, and that, they did kind of reverse some of the damage, or at least the laws, that were, opposing or subjugating the animals. And a lot of that is thanks to Glinda reversing those when she was basically in power for a little bit before the government kind of took over and kicked her out and gave it to the straw man. So, the Scarecrow, I mean. With that said, it's interesting to see the city now aware that Elphaba was right the entire time. There's graffiti on the walls that says Elphaba lives or she will return, these slogans, this, propaganda that there's this underground movement that Elphaba was kind of the martyr here, the Che Guevara, so to speak. And so here we have Dorothy, the one that murdered her, walking the streets thinking that they're going to welcome her with open arms. And, they basically want to spit on her. They get to the palace. They want to see the emperor. And here we have some more of that juxtaposition I was talking about, where in our mind's eye, we're witnessing, first Dorothy originally in the film, The Wizard of Oz, going to see the wizard, the man, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, and all the pomp and circumstance and the fire and the steam and the curtains. And we have that vision in our head. And also we have, from Wicked, not just from the film or from the play, because the film was awesome, by the way. I've seen it since last we spoke. Part 1, part 2 coming out in a couple months. With that said, though, we also know how it appeared in our mind's eye when Elphaba and Glinda went down that same path. And their interaction with the wizard and how everything turned out. And obviously in the play, the culminating in the song Defying Gravity and Chistery and everything that happened with the monkeys and the Grimoire, and the tragedy of their friendship being shattered by circumstance and fate. But now we're seeing these two new girls going down the same path as those before them. But this time they're going to a very different kind of atmosphere. Instead of the pomp and circumstance, we have this manic man person come in that kind of tells them what protocol is and how they're going to respond, and then they're going to leave. But then they're kind of introduced to Shell, but this is not the Shell that we know. We know Shell to be, at one time a spy, a cutpurse, a cutthroat, a lecher that was going down into South Stairs to rape women, giving them their medicine. And now he's this pious, almost religious Pope-like figure, kind of as a, almost like a more intense version of what Nessa Rose would have been if she had lived. And so the piety of him, he actually comes out kind of a little Pope Francis-y, where he's wearing kind of the simple robes. There's a box for him to sit on, not a throne. And he sits down, but he starts speaking in kind of this cryptic scripture kind of speak to the girls, almost like he's orating, not necessarily like he's interacting or talking to them, but like he's reading Bible verse to them, but in a twisted way, telling them to shut up and they don't matter. And Dorothy kind of tries to say, well, like, I was here before, and he's like, I don't care about you. You don't matter. Like, none of that matters. And that's when Rain decides, okay, the only way this man is maybe going to kind of break away from this attitude is if I come clean about the fact that he's my uncle, that I am the daughter of Lear, the granddaughter of his eldest sister, Elphaba. And the interesting thing here, if I remember correctly, is that he doesn't react. He does respond, but he doesn't react, which is an interesting thought, because you almost wonder if he knew, or if he's been so afraid of this ghost his entire life, of somebody like maybe Lear coming to somehow take away everything that he kind of has built around him, this charade. In a way, he's a different type of charlatan, hiding behind religion and divine blessing as the curtain that he's hiding behind. But it's interesting to see that he's being challenged by this girl who is so much like his eldest sister. And she's, finally telling him, like, you're my uncle. This is real. Like, Lear is your nephew. You need to save him. You're the only one that can save him, because obviously he doesn't have him because he didn't know where he was. So they're having this conversation, but before anything good can come of it, like, I don't know if Shell would have actually responded to that kind of confrontation, or if he would have passed it off, or maybe he would have said, hey, listen, I do kind of care about it, but let's keep it hush. It could have gone 1,000 different ways. But instead, a fiery cataclysm comes crashing through the building, because at this point in time, while she is there having this audience with the Emperor, the Emerald City is being attacked by dragons. We're going to come back to that. So now we're going to fast forward, or we're going to kind of rewind a little bit, going out of the timeline back to when Lear got kidnapped. So when Lear gets caught, we presumed originally that it was the Emerald City, but obviously Shell didn't have him. He wasn't in South Stair, at least not that Shell knew. So the only thing they can think of is that he was kidnapped by Munchkinlanders. Well, now we can go to that part of the story where these hooded figures that took him in the night, basically let him know that he is, he is a prisoner of the city-state of Munchkinland, and that Lamambi is requiring him to use the Grimory. So we have confirmation that it is the Grimory, to use against the Emerald City on behalf of Munchkinland to win the war. He refuses, because Lear had made a promise to himself, secretly to Elphaba, I'm sure, and maybe to Trism, or the idea of Trism, long, long ago, that he would never, ever use the Grimory. That's worst case scenario. So he refuses, and she says, okay, the only other option is I'm going to take you to the Emeralds, or I'm going to take you to Munchkinland, but we can't get you past the border because people can't know that Lear Throp, the next in line to be the eminent Throp, is alive. Because if they know he's alive, then I can't keep my power, because I'm Lamambi and I took that power vacuum for myself. So they have decided to turn him into into an animal and have his heart stop so that he appears dead. And they're saying that they are returning him to his native lands to be buried properly. And it's funny that Lamambi is using the same spell that we presume was used on Princess Nastoya to turn her from an elephant to a woman, to a human. And so we know she got stuck in that state. And that was part of, Lear's journey, was helping her out of her prison as an elephant. So now he is, that's his only choice, because he's not going to use the Grimmery. So he agrees to be turned into an animal, and they're going to stop his heart. They're not going to kill him. He has that assurance, but he's going to have his heart stopped. So he's got to drink this poison or whatever, and they're going to turn him into whatever. Well, there's a bird from the Congress of Birds that has been keeping an eye on him and witnesses this happen and reports back that Lear has been killed, because that's how it looked from the sky. So now they're getting the reports that Lear has been killed. Everybody's starting, oh gosh, here we go. Okay. Lamambi managed to get him into Munchkinland, and she's trying to convince him to at least help her learn to read the book, and he is flat out refusing. He's still in his elephant form, but he's awake now, and he's being kind of nursed back to health, because it did actually stop his heart, and he's got to recover from that. But she decides she's going to try to manipulate him, and what does she do? She brings somebody into the room, and this is where we see another reunion, this time of Lear and Trism. But unfortunately, just like the reunions before, this one is heartbreaking, because Trism is on the side of Munchkinland, and he is really trying hard to convince Lear to agree to help them read the Grimmery, or at least to help him so that he can continue with his mastery of dragons, which, if you recall from A Son of a Witch, was what he did before when he was in the military, when they met, and the two of them actually agreed that was what was going to be the downfall of the Emerald City, and so they blew up the building that was the roosting grounds for the dragons and killed the dragons before they fled the city and got chased. So, and that's why he assumed Trism was dead, because they wanted to punish him for killing the dragons. So now we learn that he is still raising dragons for war, but this time against the Emerald City. And so he's pleading with Lear to help them. And that's the tragedy of this conclusion, this loose end tied, is that Lear had held on to this fantasy that his lover had died because of some fault of his, that he could have saved him. And now he's learning that his lover actually did survive. And he's curious about what happened with Candle. And, basically what Trism said is, that's her story to tell, not mine. And I don't think we really get much of an answer about that. I think just more than anything, she felt that Lear was pulling away from their relationship after Trism, but at the end of the day, she kind of trapped him with a baby that she got from raping him while he was in a coma. So that's kind of not his fault, but at the same time, he agreed to help her raise the baby, and then everything happened. So he flat out still disagrees with Trism and says, no matter who is asking me, I have to decline. And so, heartbreaking as it is, as much as I've wanted over the decades for the two of them to be reunited, they come to an impasse. And so, on his way out, that's when Trism is telling Lear, may they have mercy on your soul. And Lear responds back, may they have mercy on yours. And that was their last interaction in that moment. So, we come to learn now that during that time also, that was when Tip is returned, trying to pass over the border, returned to Lamambi, and Lamambi at first was like really angry, like ready to chastise him, but then again, she's like, oh, thank God you're back, because she was really possessive of him, but maybe she did love him in some way, maybe. But Trism is reunited with Lamambi. Lamambi is not successful in getting Lear to use the Grimmery, and so they got to move forward with their plan. So now we go back to where we were with Shell and Rain and Dorothy inside the Emerald City, and the building is crumbling around them because they're being attacked by dragons. It's actually kind of funny in that moment. It went so quickly. I actually rewound it. I was listening to audiobook to go over that part of the story because I wanted to hear it again. But basically, it's just so interesting to see that as pious and pompous as Shell was acting in that moment, he actually started like panicking and like telling his little manic attendant, save me, oh my gosh. And so like while they're trying to rush him out, the girls are like, well, we're going to go with you. We'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. And so they kind of help Shell out, ironically, because it is family, but she did it begrudgingly. She didn't necessarily want to, but maybe if she saved him, she might be able to, get him to, do her a favor afterward. I did save your life. So everything comes to a head when they get out of the building. They are confronted with the dragons, with Trism and Lamambi, and they are offering a parley. And the parley is not a parley. They're just outright demanding that they turn over the Emerald City and secede, surrender the city and admit that they've lost the war. Great, it's over. But with that said, obviously, I keep wanting to say Pope Pius. This Pope Shell, the Pious Shell, I forget what the title they gave him, but it was very papal. He's being defiant, even though he just acted like a little wimp inside of the crumbling building. But he is a statesman, and he does have to sit there and kind of, he does have the sharp wit that he's always had, and he is a Throp. He does have the heritage of both Elphaba and Nessa Rose. And he was raised also by Turtleheart, same as they were. So with that said, he's being defiant. He's not just going to hand over the Emerald City in the capital of Loyal Oz just like that. So he's hoping to negotiate. And Lamambi's like, listen, I'll give you one thing. You can have Lear back. He is your nephew, and the two of you can ride off into the sunset. I'll give you that if you give me the throne. And they want proof of life. And so she's like, okay, because they had heard that Lear was killed. And now I'm kind of skipping over parts because this is the part that I vaguely remember. Because I was just so excited for it to be over, and I was like sitting here, all these like wild things going into my head, because we had all these revelations that came afterwards. So I'm forgetting the details right before that. But basically, she's like, I can offer you proof of life because they're all in doubt. And that's when she presents the elephant. The elephant comes in, the elephant in the room. Weird trope to use in this moment. But with that said, she does present him. They're like, that's not Lear. And she's like, oh, it's Lear, I swear. And I'll show you. She pulls out the Grimoire, and everybody's like, oh, you have the Grimoire too? She's like, yeah. And not only that, I can use it. So she starts reading. She finds a spell to call forth what was lost or something like that. And she completes the spell. Things go crazy. Everybody's like, ooh, what's happening? What's happening? And lo and behold, this elephant figure does start taking the shape of what was once a man. And it does eventually make its way to the form of Lear. And here he is back in his normal form. And she's like, see what I did here? But there was an unintended consequence of this spell to return back what was lost. The story that we had learned from Tip about Lamambi herself is that before they made their way to Munchkinland, they were wandering the outskirts. I think Ev was where they were. And she was seeking a way to change her appearance, I think, because she was haggard. She was an old crone, just like Lear saw on the road when he first met them in that brief cameo in A Son of a Witch. And he had told her that they did go to some foreign city across the Sea of Dunes, and it was there that she gained some power that all of a sudden overnight she is different. And she looked like, I think he referred to her as a duchess, a decrepit duchess or something like that. So we know that this this head of state character, they didn't say she was beautiful or anything like that. One thing that does come to mind is that the original film Return to Oz with Farouk Sabak, had a character, one of the antagonists was Mombi. I can't, it's been such a long time since I've seen that one. Now I want to watch it. But that is the inspiration for the name of Mombi. And of course, the Sea of Dunes is eliciting that image of them going to, I want to say, the Troll King or whatever, over the desert, where the Wheelers, it's such a cool movie. It's such a fever dream movie, but acid trip. With that said, we now know through Tip's admission that Lamombi at one point was an old crone who became young looking and started down her path of conquest as a politician to kind of take over that seat of power that was left vacant when the Throps kind of did their thing. So whatever spell she used to not look like a crone also got reversed when she returned what was lost. So now we have Lear, and now we have Lamombi back to her original form. But wait, there's more. Now we have some things happening with Rain all of a sudden. We had learned earlier in the book that it was Lear who had turned her skin from green to normal because the baby was born green and he needed to hide her heritage to protect her. And so he used the Grimoire, or he just cast a spell asking for the aid of the snakes to hide her green or something like that. Well, whatever enchantment he used in that moment also got reversed. So now he's back to his form, Lamombi's back to her form, and now Rain is back to her form. But wait, one more revelation. If there's anything that we've learned, it's that the Clock of the Time Dragon had not had the last word yet. If you recall, the baby Ozma Tipitarius was abducted as a child by a sorceress unknown. And suddenly the now young man, who, by the way, when he was just reunited with Rain, she's coming out of the crumbling building, he's arriving with Lamombi, they kind of snuck back to each other and go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're safe. They boned. Yep, they had intercourse. Which makes sense because, you can't continue the bloodline without having a baby. And so I don't know what happens in the next books, but we knew that Elphaba had a child because she had sex with Fiyero, and then later on we found out maybe she had a child with maybe Fiero's the dad. I don't know. And then we learned that Candle was pregnant, but how did she get pregnant if they didn't have sex? Well, because she raped him while he was in a coma. So secret babies coming from casual intercourse tends to be a theme here. So they had intercourse. Now they're all standing around. Now she's green, and all of a sudden Tip is transformed into the lost queen, the stolen princess, female, Ozma Tipitarius. In the flesh, the true and rightful ruler of all of Oz, the only one who can unite everybody under one banner and get rid, finally, of the politics of the Emerald City. Wow. Okay, so now we've got all these mind-blowing, presumably predictable, if you were paying attention, revelations happening in the final hours of the book. So everything's kind of falling into place, all the pieces of the puzzle. We've got the Grimoire, obviously, is going to go back into the hands of Lear, and, it really does belong to Rain. So Rain is going to go, finally, she does live happily ever after for a brief period with her mother and her father. I want to say in Colwyn Grounds, maybe? There's some brief interactions with Ozma, but things are just left awkward between the two of them. They don't want to discuss the fact that they do love each other, but circumstances are now so weird. And is she a lesbian now? Is she not? Is she in love with Ozma? Because she was in love with Tip, but Tip is not Ozma. And she's kind of having this internal conflict of what's going on. That's pretty common when it comes to the discussion of trans life. when they are in relationships and somebody transitions, is living their authentic self, the partner does have internal dialogue that is going to guide them down the path of trying to figure out who are they in relation to that distinction. And so Rain has a struggle with that, and she wants to move past it and, let's say, start a new relationship with Ozma as they are, Green and Princess. But Ozma, being the head of state now and having to kind of thrust herself into that seat, kind of gives her the cold shoulder because it's kind of necessary, because Rain needs to go live her life. And so that's kind of the unspoken ending between the two of them. Unrequited, but they did have sex, so maybe they'll have a baby later with two moms. The point here is that Rain now has an open ending. And so they bury the grimoire, and from it sprouts a tree made of broomsticks. All of them looking like Elphaba's broom, the original. It's kind of poetic to hear that, because everything in Elphaba's life starts with the grimoire. She existed because of the grimoire. It guided her. It held her fate and the fate of her children and her legacy. And here it is, the seedling that sprouts the tree of brooms, not one, but many. And that is such a beautiful picture in my mind. I loved it so much. We do learn that Candle's not satisfied with this new life, with everything that's happened between her and her husband. She does end up divorcing him, and she does end up leaving to go wherever. And he gets depressed, and Rain kind of hates that, and she decides she's going to let him live his life. And he's kind of whipped into shape, I want to say, by Iskanari, the goose, who says, like, you need to stop. You got a life to live because of her. You may have lost that, but you still have so much more to live for. Well, Rain has decided she's very affected by her father's depression. So she decides she's going to just take the grimoire and go throw it away, and she herself is going to disappear into history and become obsolete herself. And so she grabs her broom, Elphaba's original broom, that came to her through Lear, and she flies off into the sunset with the grimoire. And she flies north as far as she can go, as far as nobody's ever been, over the Sea of Dunes, past Ev, all the way until she can't do it anymore. And Lear does find the hole where she dug up the grimoire, with the shovel still sticking out, and he knows what she's doing, and he tells Iskanari, you go to her now. She needs you. And he sends him off. So Iskanari is now her, which is familiar. It's kind of cute. She's inheriting that from her dad. And he goes to find her. Well, she's kind of crashed out. She could go no further. She's stranded in the middle of this endless desert. No water, no life, draining from her. And Iskanari finds her, revives her, encourages her to keep going, and she gets up. She's like, I could do this. So she keeps going, and just barely, she had almost made it before she almost gave up. She finds what Dorothy was looking for in the beginning of the book, at the very beginning of the book, the thing that didn't exist, the myth, the objective of we'll say the symbolism of the untapped potential of the future that they all wished existed, but there was no destination to go for. She finds the ocean, and she flies over it as far as she goes with the intention of dropping the book. Now, the book, the story, the narrative, the novel ends here with a quote, and it's kind of a beautiful quote that matches the opening of the original Wicked by Gregory Maguire. And it says, a mile above anything known, the girl balanced on the wind's forward edge, as if she were a green fleck of the sea itself, flung up by the turbulent air and sent wheeling away. Where's she gone? There's 3 more books that explore that exact topic, and I haven't read them yet, so stay tuned. I promise I will get to them. I don't know how long that'll be. I do move here in a week, so but I don't have my own place. I want to get all of my setup put together, and then I'll be able to get those videos put together once I finish the books. But thank you so much for sticking around. This is a long video. It just hit 29 minutes. Thank you again for sticking through these. I'm glad I got through all 4 of the books. This was a new one for me. I hadn't read it. I had read the other one several times over the years. There's no analysis that I could find anywhere on the internet, so that's what inspired me to make these videos. So I really hope you enjoyed them. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, whatever you want. I'm not trying hard to, get you to follow me or anything like this. I'm doing this for my own gratification, and I really hope you enjoyed what I had to offer here. So we've got the trilogy of the Out of This World, or whatever it's called. I can't recall. I don't have it pulled up right now. The Story of Rain. There's 3 books that come up. The Brides of something, The Oracle and the Witch. And then there's a new book that just came out this past March. It's July right now. This past March, Gregory Maguire also came out with Elphie. And it's a prequel, I assume, about her childhood. So I plan on reading that as well. Thank you again so much. If you want, please like, share, comment. Tell me anything that I missed, anything you think I'm wrong with, something that you think is super important, or maybe I focused a little too much on something that wasn't that important. Or maybe I was just flat out wrong. I am not perfect, trust me. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.